We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady. We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
You just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam. So who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL Podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam.
Me.
Sam Monson's back.
I'm back.
Five shows away, but you're back here.
5.
You made it.
How did you survive?
Easily.
Oh, yeah?
It was great. It was a little stressful at one point trying to find guests, sufficient guests. You can't just grab anybody.
Well, you had Rick Spielman. It's a good start.
Rick Spielman.
Nice.
We had Greg Rosenthal.
Yeah. And
now, Greg, by the way, comes on right away. I know you didn't listen to any of our shows.
I didn't have time to listen to anything.
I don't blame you.
The E-type was not conducive to listening to things.
Sure. Greg rolls in and almost within 2 minutes was like questioning my hosting. He was giving me tips.
Huh.
He's like, "Oh, you don't push back on Sam enough," is what he said. I don't push back on your crazy takes, according to Greg.
Which specific crazy takes?
I think whatever you bring into the table for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was Greg's. I mean, he listens, obviously. He listens to the show. So Greg gave us feedback. We went.
Well, I'm glad somebody finally pushed back against your hostings.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try harder.
Okay.
Per Greg's suggestion. We had Trevor Sikkema talking all things positive.
And then you just went Renner.
And then I got Renner for some drafts discussion, some good discussion. And then because the model was starting to come into focus, I needed Renner for the model show. I was this close to doing monologue. Steve breaks down the Excel model discussion, but I needed somebody to kind of bounce ideas off. So I probably still talked like 90% of the show,
honestly,
but I had Renner for the 10%.
A 2-hour monologue of just the model would have been pretty funny.
So here I am using a VLOOKUP.
Pretty funny, couched with the caveat that I wouldn't have listened to it. But
I don't blame you.
I would have found it very funny if that had been out in the real world.
So yeah, we survived without you.
Okay.
I'll leave you at some point this summer because I'll have another vacation coming up. So how was the trip? You raised some money for charity and the whole deal?
Raised a lot of money. We were up to $13,000 or something.
Fantastic.
Let me get the exact number right now. Yeah, we made it, which is the first point. You drive a 62 E-Type. It's $13,258 right now. We had to raise the goal. It was $10,000 before. So yeah, if you go to drivemenshealthforward.com, you can still donate for cancer research. The E-Type made it. 62 E-Type Jag. Now look, America has some beautiful landscapes, some amazing places.
Don't be trashing my country now.
We've stayed in some pretty incredible places. I would recommend anybody just get out, see things, right? There's some insane places we stayed. Monument Valley, Zion National Park, Cadillac Ranch, which is in the middle of nowhere next to Amarillo. Pretty cool place. All kinds of places. Go out and see them. Now, I'm not sure I would entirely recommend doing it in a 62 E-Type Jag.
Right.
Because, bits were falling off the thing by the end of it. Like, it was hanging in there. We lost a screw that held on, like, the hood. We had to replace that because one side of the hood was, like, rattling itself to pieces. Needed bolts tightening on the engine pretty consistently to stop it leaking oil. By the no AC.
Beautiful pictures here.
Yeah.
It's good.
No AC, which is probably the biggest point, right? And you think that's bad going through the desert, Las Vegas, Nevada, Death Valley, all that kind of stuff. No. The no AC thing becomes a real problem once you hit the eastern side of the country.
And it's like,
it's like 97 and humid And you're
How
just,
did you survive? You just sweating the whole time?
oh, it sucked. The last couple of days in the car.
Who did most of the driving?
We split.
Yeah.
So
You
it
just
started.
split days?
No, we would. So any
Like within a day?
on the days, the journeys were sort of between 200 and 450 miles, right?
Yeah.
So a 200-mile trip, pretty easy. You can get that done, even in an E-Type, relatively simply. The bigger days, though, you broke them up into whatever, and it would be like he'd drive for a couple hours, I'd drive for a couple hours, done. But yeah, the no AC thing was tough. Now, technically, the car had AC. It was just useless.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do this kind of trip, I would recommend a more modern car that A, won't die, won't rattle itself to pieces, and B, has air conditioning.
But given that, highly recommend.
But once you have one of those,
Yeah.
go see the country.
That's cool. That's great. I'm glad you guys
This thing, by the way, is still on
bonding
my
time and everything too.
Yeah, there's my pinned tweet is the tweet, and then there's a thread that sort of shows you all kinds of pictures that I took along the way, as well as the link and all that kind of stuff.
Very cool.
E-Type, by the way, is a gorgeous car. Not necessarily designed for this kind of thing, but beautiful.
But beautiful car.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys made it, raised some money for charity, and had some fun. I'm sure. And now you're back.
Also,
Back
a
to
lot of
football.
people pointing out that my dad, at almost 70, has a full head of hair that isn't gray,
Yeah.
which just feels. I mean, it's unfair, frankly.
Yeah.
A lot of people pointed that out. I'm aware of it. I just want to say that. I know.
Didn't pass on the good genes, huh?
No, not only that, but it's not even because some people have said it comes from your mother's male side of the family, But
Sounds right. Yeah.
literally every male member on either side of my family, every male blood relative has a full head of hair.
Then there's you.
Just me that doesn't.
Has a hat.
Yeah, has a hat. Has a hat. There you go. See, look.
Look at you
Bald
guys.
ass Sam, full head of hair.
You guys might be the same age.
Yeah. Now look, his beard at least has gone fully gray, so
Yeah,
I've
that's
got that going for me.
look
But
at you.
full head of hair that isn't gray feels a little bit unfair.
Good time though, overall.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Reminder that the best place to play fantasy football this summer is Underdog Fantasy. Their Best Ball Mania tournament has $10 million in total prize money, and the best part is you just draft your fantasy football team, and that's it. There's no waivers, no trades, no in-season management. Underdog gives you your best score each week of the season, and the highest score at the end of the year win. The champion of Best Ball Mania last year drafted right here in June, so there's no time like the present to join Underdog and take your shot at $1 million draft. Plus, Underdog is going to double your first deposit. That's right, double up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code PFF. Also, if you play 10 of those dollars using promo code PFF, you get a free PFF subscription. So what are you waiting for? Head to UnderdogFantasy.com or the App Store. Play $10 with code PFF. Draft your Best Ball Mania team today. All right, what are we talking about today? We got to talk some football at some point here today. Last year, we did do a show on the biggest leaps and drops in the NFL, kind of predicting. We've got some mailbag. Do you want to start with mailbag stuff? Or do you want to go?
No, we'll start with the biggest leaps. Or do you want to hit any of the news that happened?
All right, let's touch on some
I
of the
don't
news.
know what the last thing that happened was that you talked about.
I think we didn't touch on actual news. The news
At
being
all.
like Aaron Donald broke the defensive contract structure.
Yeah. They just gave him more money just for being Aaron Donald.
Yeah, well, because he was threatening to retire.
True.
He said, I might
But they
retire.
didn't. Is that an unprecedented contract that they just gave him a raise? There were no additional years, which is usually how that works.
Yeah.
They just gave
throw
him more
some-
money.
Some void years in there.
Did they even do that? I think they just gave him more money. Here, Aaron Donald, here's your 2 years.
You're awesome.
You're now
Here's some
just
money.
getting more money for your 2 years.
Yeah, that's how you do it. So the Rams paid Aaron Donald a lot of money. News in June is like Tyreek Hill said 2 is more accurate than Patrick Mahomes. That constitutes news here in June.
Well, I
Mac
think that
Jones
would
has
probably,
a fresh deep ball.
I think that would probably constitute news in any period of the year, just because it's crazy,
More accurate, though? He specifically said more accurate. He didn't say Tua is better than Patrick Mahomes. He didn't say any of that stuff. He didn't say Tua has a better arm than Patrick Mahomes.
Good.
He just said
More accurate.
he's more accurate.
Okay.
And if you went throw for throw, depending on how deep down the field you're talking, it's not like that crazy.
I just think Tyreek Hill's at a tough spot trying to talk up Tua when you've come from Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
You're going to have to say some stuff, and it's not going to look great.
I'm buying it, though. I'm ready.
Oh, yeah?
Tua's breakout.
Okay.
Buying the breakout this year.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Aaron. We've talked a lot about Aaron Donald and the whole thing, but Just how good is he? You know, people I think are, I don't want to say people are catching on, but we've seen just how good Aaron Donald is. That people are, and I don't know if it's just because they won a Super Bowl. When people are putting together their top 5 all-time list and of defensive players and all that stuff, like Aaron Donald's getting mentioned now. Like people are going through these exercises and putting him with Lawrence Taylor and putting him with Deion Sanders and Reggie White and Bruce Smith and all that stuff. Just how good is Aaron Donald?
Yeah, the problem with these types of conversations is that, you know, we don't have the kind of PFF data on Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White and Mean Joe Green and all those kind of guys, and it's very difficult to just. We know the limitations of like sack numbers and tackles, you know, and all the kind of data that does exist for those guys. And it's very difficult without the advanced data and the kind of stuff that we have to fill in the blanks to figure out if they really were as dominant as those stats make him look. But when you have them for Donald and you start looking, and every time you kind of peel back one layer of the onion, it's the same story. Like, it doesn't matter what you do, what layer of context or nuance you add to it, Donald remains absurd. And we had this conversation years ago when J.J. Watt was doing his thing and he was at the peak of his powers, and Donald wasn't yet in the league or wasn't yet the best player in the league. And it's like every data point you put J.J. Watt in, he exists in his own little anomalous, you know, outlier. Not in the same plane as everybody else. He's just different. That is where Aaron Donald is just all the time. And it doesn't matter what context or what additional piece of, well, have you thought about this? What happens if you look? It's the same. So, you know, when you think about double teams and all that kind of stuff, like Donald has been in the league now. There's a lot of players that dominate for a year or two and then disappear, right? Because the league understands how to adjust to things. And that's the next big sort of test of greatness, is how long can you do it for? Because eventually the league figures out what you do well and is prepared to stop it, even if it means sacrificing other things. And that's why a lot of the times quarterbacks, you know, they can be amazing for a year or two, and then the league has a plan. And they can still be successful, but they might not be as scintillating as they were at the start, because the rest of the NFL is taking that thing away and forcing you to do something else. And even if it means, you know, the next guy is going to dominate because you open up that space, they're not going to lose against Plan B, or against Plan A, rather. Donald has been winning with Plan A since day one, and there's nothing the NFL can do to take it away. Plan A works every single game. And the only way Plan A isn't going to work is if you literally make it impossible, get the ball out of the quarterback's hands in 2 seconds every single play, you know, run the hell away from him, like everything to make sure that Plan A cannot function. That's the only way you can take Aaron Donald away, which obviously has knock-on effects to the offense. Like you can only do so much when the ball has to come out of your hands in 1.8 seconds every single play.
That all sounds good and all, but they do. I mean, teams do put extra bodies on Aaron Donald, and they do try to get rid of the ball, and he still grades extremely well.
Yeah.
The grade and the value that he's bringing to the table. Number 1 in PFF WAR among interior defensive linemen each of the last 5 years. I believe he's been top graded every year since 2015, right? As far as DI goes?
Yes.
Was there a year that anybody surpassed him since his rookie season?
Not interior defense.
From a value standpoint, though, again, we've used WAR a lot as far as trying to explain player value, trying to cross-compare positions. The thing with Donald last year he set a record for WAR, which is both, you know, it's a little bit cumulative. It's more, you know, opportunity-driven, getting out on the field and then playing at a high level. He was worth over 1.15 wins, which might not mean anything to anyone else, but we're talking most interior defensive linemen are worth less than a win per year. I mean, and most of them are closer to 0 wins. It's like 0.15. It's extremely low. So Aaron Donald is breaking the scale as far as adding wins to the table, and he's been so good. He's been so good that you can't, like, you know, you've heard people through the years, like we debated edge rush versus interior pass rush. What's more valuable? Like, you can't be like, well, look at what Aaron Donald does. That's more valuable. You can't compare to what he's doing because he's such an extreme outlier at his position. He's so good. Of course he's more valuable. He is not changing the value of interior pass rushers. He's just so good. He just happens to be the most valuable defensive player by far.
Yeah.
At positions where WAR is WAR is more likely to push you toward corners or safeties or, coverage first players. But because Donald dominates so much, you can make the argument that he is the most valuable defensive player. And that's before even factoring in the force multiplier aspect of it and double teams and what he opens up for other people.
The pass rush is just crazy. When you consider the idea that edge rushers get more pressure than interior defensive linemen, right? In a way, it sounds counterintuitive because defensive linemen have the shortest path to the quarterback, right? A guy lined up in the B gap doesn't have that far to travel to get to the quarterback, but he has to travel through more bodies typically, right? It's a tighter space. There's less room to work in, and the quarterback generally sees it coming, right? Because you're so close and right in front of him. You don't tend to operate in his blind side an awful lot. Edge rushers, they have a ton of space to work with because they're usually one-on-one with the tackle, and if you're going on the outside route in particular, you got all the space in the world to work with, right? So if you can beat that guy athletically, you can get around him. B, again, if you're on the other side of the field, the quarterback's working, the entire thing is happening essentially in his blind side. He never has any idea if you're coming or not. So you get pressure that doesn't happen from an interior point of view. So edge rushers get a significant portion more pressure than interior players. Donald leads the league in pressures basically every year.
Yep.
And over any period of time, last year, last 2 years, last 5 years, whatever you want to do, pick your time period, Donald leads the NFL in pressures, and by a pretty significant margin. And part of that is because guys like Von Miller have missed a year in there, and that'll help. But that in itself is notable, right? Donald hasn't missed a year. The dude is built like the Hulk.
Right, he has the durability too.
Right.
He plays all the snaps.
Despite being, the concern on him coming out undersized. Right? Well, Aaron Donald is only 285 pounds. That can't work. The dude has been Iron Man. He's built like the Hulk. He doesn't miss time, and he leads the league in pressure every single year pretty much, or any period of time. That's not supposed to happen. That is weird. The fact that he almost broke the sack record in a single season as an interior player shouldn't be possible. That's not supposed to happen. The rest of those guys that have that, that threaten that record, they're all edge rushers. They all have that, period where just, a bunch of sacks went your way and you were able to take advantage of that space on the edge and you got that run. Donald doing this stuff as an interior guy almost exclusively, it cannot be overstated how ridiculous that is. Nobody else has come close.
Special player. Last year, most valuable defensive players, Aaron Donald. Then he was at 1.16 wins above replacement. 1.16. The next closest was Max Crosby at 0.81. Max Crosby, Jalen Ramsey, also of the Rams, Micah Parsons. I mean, again, awesome players. Max Crosby with a huge breakout season. He led the league in pressures, right? Crosby last year
at 100.
Ramsey, always, a very good corner. And then Parsons, who had that incredible rookie season as a pass rusher and, hybrid edge linebacker, and Donald dwarfed all of them. He's special enough that you need to go back and say when Ed Oliver came out or when Maurice Hurst came out, these guys that were playing at 285, you can't be like, well, Aaron Donald does it, right? Because Donald is so good at everything. He's so good with technique, with his hand position, with his power. A lot of times I know NFL players, like when you hear them talk, this happened a couple years ago, when you hear a quarterback talk and he's talking about like what he's seeing before a play, and the media kind of goes nuts when they hear it. Oh my gosh, this guy's so smart. Like, well, most NFL players, like that's their language, right? That's how they talk. But you hear Donald talk about how he approaches things and how he approaches watching guards and centers and studying the film, right? So he's not just an athletic freak. He is a technical, he's a machine, right? Technically, with power, with speed, with burst. And then he's over there studying how the center's going to double team. He knows when he's going to have a one-on-one. And I've never seen anybody, when he's one-on-one, he's pretty much going to win, right? Like you leave him one-on-one, he's going to win every time. That's what really separates Donald. It's kind of like the Tyreek Hill thing, right? Like when you leave Tyreek Hill one-on-one, he's going to run by you. Yeah. Donald has that same ability to win when you do whatever. The protection's not set properly or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so athletically is only part of it, right? Like athletically, there's no difference essentially between Ed Oliver and Aaron Donald. in terms of what they're capable of doing physically, moving around, speed, quickness, all those kinds of things. But obviously Ed Oliver isn't a fraction of the player that Aaron Donald is, because Donald is technically way better. Hands in particular, the ability to defeat blocks, that idea of him training with knives, all that kind of craziness, like that lets him beat guys immediately. Ed Oliver doesn't have that. And then the other part that you mentioned there was some video clip where he was talking. Was it on I Am Athlete? Was that the podcast?
Yeah, I think that's where the clip came from.
Where he was talking about the tape, the way he watches tape, and how he uses it to essentially figure out like when he's actually going to have an opportunity to win. Because this is the thing, right? Even pass rushers like Aaron Donald, you're going to get maybe a great game. You're going to get 10 pressures in the game, right? If they're passing 50 times, you're getting a pressure 1 every 5 dropbacks. So you're really picking and choosing like the plays you're actually going to have any chance of making a play. So and in Donald's case, that goes through the roof, because half the time you're double teamed, they're doing strange things to try and take you out of the game that don't happen for other people. So Donald's tape watching is not like, hey, how does this guard play, because I got to figure out how I can beat him. Donald is like, I'm going to beat whoever the hell is one-on-one in front of me every single time. I don't even need to think about that. What I need to watch tape to figure out is, can I work out when I'm going to get a one-on-one opportunity and know where it's going to come so that I can attack the right gap at the right time and be through immediately. So Donald's tape study, and this is, I think, common through basically all great players, is they are all freakishly good at watching tape and understanding what's coming before it happens. Richard Sherman was always great at this, right? There were all these plays where Richard Sherman is essentially baiting somebody and running the route because he knows what's coming. Luke Kuechly, we talked about instincts. It wasn't instincts. The dude watched tape and understood what was happening and knew what was coming before it was coming. Like those
FBI
guys.
Stand, football intelligence.
Yeah.
FBI.
Like, it really is. And Donald is, an athletic freak, but also has this incredible understanding of what is happening and when, so that when he does get singled up randomly against a guy who has no shot of stopping him one-on-one, he knows it's coming, and he can attack that guy without that hesitation of, oh, look, I'm one-on-one now. What?
Any reservations? Now they're going to pay him over $31 million per year. We're talking about quarterbacks up in the $40 million range, but there's still quarterbacks obviously making $30 million. I mean, it's like a low-end quarterback money, and it's the money that high-end receivers are starting to get. Are we starting to get a feel for elite play? Like, is the market actually correcting in the right direction, say? That, yeah, quarterbacks should get most of the money, but elite receivers are probably worth in the $30 million range based on what we've seen. And when you have an elite Hall of Fame caliber player in his prime, still in his prime, like Aaron Donald, you pay him the $31 million, and it's like, whatever, that's fine. It'll be worth it.
Look, the Rams are testing this like stars and scrubs approach to the absolute limit at this point. They have these, 5 guys that account for all of the production, all of the star power on that roster. They're doubling down on it by giving them all new monster market-setting contracts, Cooper Kupp as well. I like, it's worked so far. I don't know if this can only make it more difficult to sustain, but ultimately the player in the NFL that should earn the most money outside of quarterbacks is Aaron Donald. So if Aaron Donald gets that contract, fine. I mean, obviously at some point that becomes a problem in terms of assembling 53 guys. Like when you have Matthew Stafford and Jalen Ramsey and Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald, and they're all earning top end of the market money at some stage, that's an issue. But they're the right guys. Like, those are the guys that should be getting paid that kind of money.
The PFF NFL Podcast is brought to you by Cash App. Cash App's the easiest way to send, spend, and save your money. You can send or request money from your friends when they owe you for dinner, drinks, literally anything. Maybe in-season bets, Brandon Graham sack totals, whatever it might be. Besides just sending money back and forth with Cash App, you can invest in stocks with as little as $1, as well as buy, sell, and send Bitcoin instantly. Cash App also lets you design your own debit card completely free to spend money anywhere you'd like. Cash App will laser print it and mail it to you, all for free. The card comes with free discounts at your favorite places called Boosts. So sign up for Cash App today using referral code TOUCHDOWN, which gives new users $15. It's promo code TOUCHDOWN for $15 free over at Cash App. All right, so the other news was, again, Tyreek said guys were Tua was accurate. Timo, our friend Timo, said that I don't want to put words into his mouth. He kind of compared Hunter Renfrow to Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, you
Hunter
don't need
Renfrow just got, but he said hot take, and then that thing just took off. So that's what happens in June. That was like when Tresh said that Tyreek Hill's the best deep threat 2 years ago, and we were like, listen, 12-year-old Randy Moss still exists.
Yeah.
You know, quotes. June's also when you
don't want to. You don't need to.
Thing.
Yeah. You don't need to put words in Timo's mouth. We can pull up the tweet. Hot take. The Raiders paid like 60% of what the Rams paid to the same player, i.e. Hunter Renfrow is Cooper Kupp. To be fair, he then threaded some replies. They have similar usage in route tree. Kupp runs more routes that are McVay staples, deep crosses, etc., because he plays with McVay. Kupp is also the most famous proponent of being more quick than fast, which is exactly the scouting report for Renfrow. Is Kupp better? Maybe. And then he says, do I believe that 100%? Lol, no. But it's fun to think about these things and think what we might be sure about, but what might be wrong.
I think reading behind the scenes over here, reading into it, I think he's basically saying if you gave Hunter Renfrow Cooper Kupp volume, he could put up similar numbers.
Well, he's basically saying if you transplanted Hunter Renfrow into Cooper Kupp's role and remove Cooper Kupp from the Rams, it would be the same. And I think that's madness.
Yeah, I think I would disagree there.
But I think there's a kernel of truth in that it would get you closer than you probably think.
Yeah, of course.
But
I mean, that the one knock on Kupp when you're looking at last year and saying this is an all-time season is it is easier to win from the slot. Like it is easier to put up volume from the slot. And I think through that lens, if Timo's saying, well, you know, if you give Renfrow higher volume from the slot with the Rams. Now, Timo didn't want to say like with Matthew Stafford because he's also he's not a big Stafford guy. Uh-huh. But that's part of what made Kupp special, though. Kupp and Stafford had special chemistry, and there is something to that. That's Brady to Gronk and Rodgers to Devontae Adams. There is something about chemistry and quarterback and receivers working together because Stafford and Kupp had it. Kupp also, he's a little bigger. He's definitely bigger and more physical and can win on the outside a bit more. And the other thing about Kupp, when you say quicker than fast, he ran like a 4.64 or whatever it was at the combine, but we all know that the Rams were using more like on-field game speed type of metrics that are available, and Kupp's a lot faster than that. So he is not like he's not just a big, slow slot. Kupp does have some speed to his game as well.
He does, and that's the thing. Like, so even when you go back to his college tape, like he was running away from the Pac-12. Like he eviscerated Oregon when they played when Eastern Washington played Oregon one game, put up like 240 yards, which is a game that I graded and sold me immediately on Cooper Kupp. Now, every time he then worked out, it's like, 4.6, come on. Yeah, it was annoying.
He then got open at the Senior Bowl, right?
Right, exactly. So, and you watched him at the Combine as well. You watch guys sometimes and they just move differently and look better than everybody else, and there's something to that. And so he did look incredible. But that was the game where you watch and he's catching a pass and then just outrunning a Pac-12 defense. Like, these are legitimate athletes he's running away from. If he runs a 4.6, it doesn't show up in the pads. Hunter Renfrow doesn't have that. Like, they might have similar comparable 40 times, comparable even the NGS stuff that sort of shows actual play speed, but it manifests differently. Like, it manifests itself in a completely different way. When Cooper Kupp catches a ball, he can outrun a defense and go the distance. Hunter Renfrow can't. Like, that's not a skill set that he possesses.
They've also both been given some leeway to kind of create their own routes, right? To kind of run, instead of just like an in and out, it's like an in and out and in and out.
Yeah.
They're adding layers to the route running, in part because they do have a good feel for where defenders are and how to get open, and they've both kind of been given a little bit of that leeway by their respective teams.
Yeah, another couple of elements. One, Cooper Kupp's a much better blocker than Hunter Renfrow is, a bigger guy. Two, as much as, Cooper Kupp's had a ton of production in the slot, the dude also wrecked press coverage. Like, he can play outside and win one-on-one against elite number one press corners. Again, not 100% sure Hunter Renfrow does that on a consistent basis. Two, the grading doesn't back that up, right? Cooper Kupp had a 94 grade last year. Hunter Renfrow...
Yeah, it's one of the best seasons we've ever
Hunter
seen.
Renfrow was 71.7. Like, the data, the actual grading doesn't... Now, Timo's argument, again, this is actually putting words in his mouth, but Timo's argument presumably would be, yeah, but Matthew Stafford, the environment, the Rams, blah, blah, you swap over, that's going to equalize those grades a bit. Again, I would say, yeah, probably to some extent, it's not closing a 20-point gap.
Here's the other thing, too. NFL teams knew that Cooper Kupp was the go-to guy by the end of the season.
Yeah.
So whether it was Stafford to Kupp against the Bucs.
I mean, particularly, Robert Woods gets injured.
Yeah.
It is Cooper Kupp. Okay, OBJ shows up and starts making some plays, but for most of the season, it was unquestionably Cooper Kupp.
We're talking week 17, Cooper Kupp with clutch touch, or week 18, clutch touchdowns from Cooper Kupp, even though I think they lost that game. Yeah, in the divisional playoff against the Bucs, the all-out blitz where Kupp gets behind the defense. In the conference championship game against the 49ers, Kupp's a big part of that whole game. And then in the Super Bowl, right? Anytime you needed a third down conversion, game-winning touchdown, and the whole deal, it's all Cooper Kupp with Matthew Stafford. So I would take Kupp. And that's why Timo said hot take.
Yeah, it is a hot take, and I believe it's an incorrect hot take.
Perfect. So let's go to
by the way, this is also one of those things that, like, it's like, oh, look at the next crazy thing PFF is saying now. PFF is not one voice.
Oh, that also happened while you were gone. Connor McQuiston was all over Good Morning Football for his coach rankings. Now, he did not have Mike Tomlin or Sean McVay in the top 10.
Okay.
Your thoughts?
Again, I would disagree.
I would disagree, too. Stop saying PFF says everything. Now, they had Connor on to defend himself the next day after they trashed him, apparently. I do this all the time when I'm on, like, Pittsburgh radio. They're like, the social media account said this. I'm like, I don't account for what they say.
Right. What do you want me to do about it?
I'm going to separate myself. Najee Harris was not a top 10 running back. I'm not. That's someone else's voice. It's not mine.
It used to be mine.
Used to be.
Once upon a time.
If I'm at the byline, if it's my byline, you can talk to me. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, once upon a time, we ran the Twitter account.
We did.
Then you could blame me for what came out then.
That's
not anymore.
Right. Not anymore.
Not mine.
Blame Gordon.
Yeah.
Go get him. Come after Gordon. He's a man. He's not 40 yet, though.
No.
But Mike Tomlin and Sean McVay,
though.
not in the top 10 for coaches. I would disagree with both. I think so. Connor did go through his process. I heard a little bit about it. I didn't get to read the whole thing. I do think the analytics community as a whole, not saying Connor or people at PFF, the analytics community as a whole, when evaluating coaches, I think sometimes struggle to only see what you can quantify.
Well, yeah.
Which is like fourth down decisions. And then you only, because that's like the hot button issue. I mean, look, there are other people in the analytics community who are just like, please stop talking about fourth down decisions. Like it's old news. The league's already adjusted. And it's literally a fraction of what a coach has to actually do. A small fraction of what a coach actually has to do in a given week. So I think the analytics community or analytics Twitter or whatever you want to call it sometimes overrates the thing that you can see, which is not always the thing that is most valuable.
There's a whole world of stuff that goes on that you have no privy to that is really important. And Mike Tomlin is probably the best example of this. Like, Mike Tomlin runs an organization that doesn't necessarily lean on a lot of this analytics stuff and they do a lot of things wrong in Pittsburgh, and yet almost always overcome it all to be a successful team and not have a losing season, and generally are some form of kind of contender, quote unquote. That happens because Mike Tomlin, right? Because that dude runs an organization that everybody buys into and believes in and play better because of it. And this happened going into the Champions League final. I think somebody was asking Jurgen Klopp, the Liverpool coach, one of the best soccer coaches in the world. And they were like, your teams are now going on, 3 finals and haven't scored. They were sort of saying, this bad thing has happened 3 or 4 times in a row now. How do you get your team up and sort of say, don't worry about this, guys, this won't happen this time? He was like, well, that's a ridiculous way of framing it. Why would I put that in their heads in the first place? Like, that will immediately start them thinking about the bad thing we don't want them to happen. Like, we don't concentrate on that at all. We focus on the good thing we want to happen, and that's we manifest this stuff by thought. He's like, that's just basic psychology. He's like, this might not be useful for your job as a journalist, but like maybe at home, think about that, take it away. And roll that away. Like, that's how these guys are working. They are changing the thought process and therefore the outcomes of the players they're dealing with in a way that you don't even see most of the time.
That's why I think, like, when Belichick does a press conference, I don't think he's always being a jerk. There's probably some times where he's being a jerk. But when he says we're on to the next week, we forgot about the whole thing, we're moving on. Like, when he does that, I think that's legitimately his mindset.
Well, this
because
is why
it really does not help him. Like you said, it helps journalists to look back and tell a story and all that stuff. It does not help the football coach to think about, oh, I made this bad decision, other than, like, you learn from it, you move on. So that's how coaches think.
Well,
what is the best thing for my team moving forward?
This is why you simply can't take, like, what these people say at face value and believe that they're simply answering the question you gave and telling the truth, because they're not, right? Just like Jurgen Klopp, these guys are trying to achieve something, and half the time they're not speaking to you at all. They're speaking to their players or somebody else in the organization. Like, the words that they put out into the public sphere are crafted. They're not just answering a question in a press conference and saying what they think. Now, look, some coaches I'm sure do, and there's levels to this, right? Klopp is the best in the world, or one of the best in the world, for a reason. The fact that he's thinking about these things are part of that reason. There are coaches in the NFL that I'm sure operate at that level as well, and when they give answers to journalists, they're not simply answering the question. They are thinking about the words they're putting out there and thinking, well, A, what do I definitely not want to say? And B, what actually helps me? What is beneficial to my players or my quarterback that just had a crappy game or whatever it is? So they're answering with an agenda.
Right.
Now, look, I'm sure there are coaches in the NFL that simply don't operate at that level, as there are in all walks of life. And there are people that just blurt whatever thought, half-formed, jumps into their brain at any given moment, and you can probably identify who those people are. But there are definitely coaches that do operate on that kind of level, and you can't take what they say at face value all the time.
You didn't listen to the Rick Spielman interview, but I suggest everyone who didn't goes back and does that.
I will go back and listen to it.
He mentioned how he was like the final eyes and ears to things that they put out, that the Vikings put out on social media, videos that they put on Vikings.com, kind of controlling the message, making sure that they didn't give away anything. I did pose the question to him about Kyler Murray and how Arizona, like, did the Arizona social media director have to go into Steve Keim's office? And Rick's were like, yeah, like that. You have those conversations all the time. It is fascinating. So we were getting into, as a general manager, we only judge you by draft picks and free agent signings, basically. The roster moves that you make, and that's probably 25% of the job because there's so much else. I think coaching is similar. At the same time, I do think, just like people don't think QB wins matter, coaching wins probably matter. I mean, you're the final say. You're influenced by your quarterback, probably more with elite quarterbacks, but you can probably judge coaches by wins, right? Because
that's all you can judge them by.
But it's like judging a CEO by the bottom line, by revenue, or by margin, or whatever it might be. You would, like, that's okay, because it's like every previous decision had to flow through you, so there's something to judging you by the results. Even if wins and losses can be fickle, over time, Mike Tomlin in particular, the fact that he's always won games since 2007 or whatever it is, that means something.
So that's the problem, is the period of time over which you're judging the wins and losses. Because ultimately, all the stuff we just talked about, the calculating aspect of what you say, the things that you do behind the scenes that get players to buy into you, to make them play better, to ultimately the whole point in all that is that leads to wins, right? And you pair that with the in-game stuff, fourth down decisions, and when to punt, when to go for it, all those kinds of things, 2-point conversions, blah, blah. All that together, it's all about maximizing the number of wins, right? And each one of those tiny little things may be stealing you a tiny percentage point, but you add it all up and you win more games than everybody else. So the whole point in all of that stuff is that it's part of the job that all leads to wins. You just can't measure most of it. It's easy to measure the fourth down decision stuff because it's relatively black and white. It's a lot harder to measure the stuff that, A, you don't even see half of it, and B, when you do see it, like how do you how do you judge the Jurgen Klopp thing, right? What percentage did that give? Now, they lost that game, by the way, right? They lost 1-0 to Real Madrid, so it didn't work. But what percent did that give them a boost, right? Did that versus, oh, yeah, like we specifically, I told them all, whatever you do, don't give away that, first dumbass goal. I can't remember what the thing was, but like how much did framing it in a positive way affect them versus framing it in a negative way? It probably did make a difference psychologically. Like the man is not speaking from, like, I just plucked this out of the air. That's like a psychologically recognized thing. So it was the right thing to do. It probably gave them a percentage boost, but it wasn't enough to stop them losing. So all of this stuff goes towards wins and losses. I think the big problem with NFL coaching is that it typically, the decisions get made on a 1-year sample size, right? It's like things were going okay, and then you went 6-11, so now you're fired.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
I mean, McVay's got a pretty good track record with the Rams. Tomlin has a pretty good track record.
But you see how quickly the hot seat comes on, right? Like coaches that have good track records, it doesn't take long for people to start talking about those guys needing to be fired.
Well, the other thing, the other part about McVay, right? So if you're analyzing this and say, well, he went from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford, therefore he's better. On the other hand, it takes a coach to adjust the offense to Matthew Stafford's skill set, which is what happened. Matthew Stafford had the best season of his career, and we kind of predicted, right? He's going to have his best season, probably both from a grading standpoint, probably both from a result standpoint. Why? Because the environment's better. Who sets the environment? Well, the front office and the head coach, right? I mean, that's, Les Snead and Sean McVay put the environment around so that Matthew Stafford could have a Super Bowl caliber season for the first time in his career.
I mean, you don't need to look any further than Bill Belichick, right? The greatest coach of all time at the helm of the greatest dynasty in league history in a time where you're not supposed to be able to do that, right? Like they set up infrastructure, the salary cap, all this kind of stuff to prevent those things from happening. You're not supposed to be able to assemble the Dallas Cowboys of the 90s or the 49ers of the 80s. You can't do that anymore. And yet the Patriots went on this run of unparalleled success. Brady leaves, Belichick goes 7-9, and we're talking about, is Brady actually, or is Belichick even?
While Brady wins
Belichick
the Super
even
Bowl
any
with the
good?
Bucs.
Yeah, okay, that definitely didn't help. But
right.
The guy went 7-9, right? He's like one game under 500, and we're like, I mean, is Belichick even a good coach?
Well,
my point being,
yeah.
If 2021, so they go 10 wins last year with Mac Jones, if he'd gone 6 or 5.
Oh, you'd be questioning, Belichick could do anything?
Not only would you be questioning it, but like he would be under legit pressure.
Yeah.
Like how much rope would he have? How much time would they give him before he was fired? And we're talking about the greatest NFL coach in history and a guy who it's impossible to have more credit in the bank than Bill Belichick had. And yet he would probably only have 2.5 seasons of like below average play before you're just like, I'm sorry, Bill, we got to go in a different direction. See ya. Like, that's how like knee jerk the whole process is when you're judging it by wins and losses.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we had said, we've talked about this before too, with Belichick. I mean, you can do his record with and without Brady, but at the same time, he helped make Tom Brady. He created the environment to create Tom Brady, which is part of coaching, which is something you do deserve credit for. That just kind of shows the value of the true elite quarterback, right? The edge that quarterback or Tom Brady is going to bring to the table. All right, do you want to get into some of the what do we call it? Risers and fallers and biggest leaps and drops in the NFL?
Uh-huh.
Do you want to start with that? This is your idea.
My idea. Oh, okay.
We're talking teams, we're talking players.
Yeah, whatever you want.
You can't procrastinate it any longer, Sam. You got to bring something to the table. Like the Dolphins, big leap.
I'm not going with the Dolphins, but
I was
will
going to
go.
take the Dolphins.
I'll stay with the same team. Tua.
You going to take a big leap?
Tua's going to have a big leap. He has to, right? Why would he not have a big leap? We now have Tyreek Hill added to the mix. We have a better offense in terms of Mike McDaniel coming over and changing what's happening. We have an offensive line that's been somewhat overhauled. They're not 100% there, but the players that they've added, Teron Armstead, Connor Williams, are big upgrades. I think the bit that gets ignored a lot of the time is that offensive line should get better just from the system that's coming in. Mike McDaniel's system, the Shanahan tree, that helps offensive line as much as it helps anything. So even if they'd done nothing on the offensive line, you would hope it would improve significantly just from that system coming in. For the first time, I think you're going to have a fair evaluation of Tua, and that should make him play a lot better.
I agree. I mean, last year at this time, we did predict better stats, but maybe similar play from Sam Darnold. At least I did. I was off on that because Sam Darnold wasn't good and the stats still weren't good.
Yeah.
But I would make a similar prediction with Tua, where I do think he'll play better, and the stats will be better. Right, the execution will be better. I think the fact that he's got Tua has some Jimmy Garoppolo to his game, in that for most plays you're looking at him and you're like, wow, quick release, pretty accurate, getting the ball where it needs to go. He's getting it out on time. And then every now and again, there's just these boneheaded decisions that Tua has to his game. He's got some ugly ones in there, just like a Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think there'll be some similarities to what Garoppolo did in San Francisco with Mike McDaniel, except perhaps a better supporting cast because Tyreek Hill is anchoring the whole thing. So I would say the Dolphins taking a leap. You're saying Tua taking a leap. The problem with all of this in the AFC is even if a team takes a leap forward, it might not show up in the record.
Well, that's why I'm not going with the Dolphins.
Yeah, just saying Tua. Well, I'm going to say Derek Carr is taking a leap forward. I even saw it in the chat here today. People think we have Raiders bias. And let me assure you, we're biased against all 32 teams. It's not just the Raiders.
Why do we have Raiders? Because we don't think Hunter Renfrow is as good as Cooper Kupp?
That, and we don't think Derek Carr's Aaron Rodgers, probably, like all that stuff. It all adds up when you think that players are exactly what they are. So obviously we have some historic Raiders bias. You made fun of Derek Carr one time 4 years ago.
I mean, he's gotten better since then. I've said that.
He has. I could see Derek Carr's going to he's going to take a step forward. We talked about this before too. If Derek Carr starts putting up MVP caliber numbers, do we talk about Derek Carr as MVP or Davante Adams?
Carr, I keep telling you that.
But if Davante Adams is literally the difference in Carr's stats from last year to this year, you have to look at these receivers. If Davante Adams does this, or if Tyreek Hill does this, or if A.J. Brown goes in, and their respective quarterbacks all of a sudden put up ridiculous numbers, we have to look at the reason why that's happened.
Yeah, and you say the reason that the quarterback won MVP is the receiver. Like Tom Brady increased his career single season touchdown total by the exact number of touchdowns that Randy Moss.
But he was always Tom Brady. He was always really good. And he was coming off. He had the worst receiving core in the NFL.
But he threw 23 more touchdowns than he'd ever thrown before, the exact number that Randy Moss caught. And Randy Moss was never in the conversation for MVP because the quarterback is.
So I'm going to say Derek Carr is going to take a big leap forward this year because he's got Hunter Renfrow, who's a Cooper Kupp-esque.
Yeah.
He's got Davante. Imagine having Cooper Kupp and Davante Adams on the same team. That's what you have.
You're not at all concerned by the fact that you could start it on the offensive line for them?
No, I think maybe the new system will help a little bit. I don't think it's that disastrous. Look, here's the deal.
It's pretty bad.
We talked about how bad they were last year. Did it affect the offense?
Kinda.
Not really. They still put up huge numbers for the most part. It hurt a little bit in the second half of the season trying to figure out where Alex Leatherwood's moving around and still, giving up. I think Leatherwood's going to be better in year 2. I don't think it's going to completely hold back the Raiders. I don't feel great about the offensive line. It's probably bottom 10, but I think they'll be okay because you have Adams and you have Renfrow. You have guys that can get open quickly.
Okay.
They lose Bryan Edwards though. They lose fourth quarter Bryan Edwards.
Yeah, auto.
It's going to hurt. Derek Carr's going to take a big leap forward.
Okay. Devontae Smith.
Ooh.
Devontae Smith. So,
Eagles wide receiver.
Yeah. And now number 2 wide receiver, which is important. I love Devontae Smith coming out. Incredible route runner. So savvy. The dude won the Heisman Trophy for a reason. He's incredible. But he's 166 pounds when he was coming out. And you're like, does that make a difference at the NFL level? It shouldn't because he gets open and he does really well at the things that are important to succeed. But the track record of guys being really good at that size is not great. Year 1, it's still an unknown. He was really good. His route running translated immediately. His work in, sideline catches, all that kind of stuff. But you did see plays where he struggled physically at the catch point or just dealing with bigger body guys. And like, now, was that just year one transition and we're going to see him get better in year two and become that number one guy? Well, now he doesn't have to, because A.J. Brown came over in a trade. They gave him the contract. A.J. Brown is 220 pounds, 225, a physical monster. He's the guy that can win with physicality. Devontae Smith can just go back to being, or can just go to being, you know, the Z receiver who gets to play in space and doesn't have to deal with press coverage, and can just be himself and dominate with route running and sideline catch skills and all those kinds of things. If Jalen Hurts is up to the task, Devontae Smith should have a huge year because of that.
Devontae Smith still played pretty well.
Yeah,
no,
I'm not saying he was bad. I'm just saying you did see
above average or to 75th percentile in receiving grade and, you know, against single coverage and all that stuff. I mean, he did very well.
Yeah, I'm just saying you did see plays where the lack of physicality or the lack of size showed up, and it's not to say that that means he couldn't develop that part, but it was at least it was a bigger question after year one than it was going into year one for me.
Devontae Smith caught only 39% of his contested catch opportunities. That was 22nd percentile in the NFL, using PFF IQ, of course. Is that what we should expect going forward from Devontae, right? There are receivers who will catch 45, 50+% of their contested catch opportunities. Is that what we should expect from Devontae Smith? By the way, he also had one of the highest average depth of targets last year. In part, you've got this, what became a run-first offense and more of like a downfield passing attack. Is that the best usage for Devontae Smith, or should he be working the underneath stuff a little bit more?
I mean, I think he can do both. The key for him, I don't expect him to be a big contested catch guy ever. But the point being, now they've engineered an environment where he shouldn't have to be. It's kind of like, you know, Justin Herbert was amazing year one under pressure, but the Chargers' approach was to make sure he's under less pressure in year two, right? Doesn't matter how good he was. Let's make sure that number is smaller next season. The Eagles have engineered a scenario where it doesn't matter whether he's going to get better or not at contested catches. Let's reduce the number of times Devontae Smith has to try and make a contested catch because he's going to be wide open most of the time. Let's play towards that, and that's what they've done. That should ensure the best version of Devontae Smith you're going to see.
I talk a lot about the third-year offensive line breakout. So I think, you know, who are the guys that could experience that? Andrew Thomas kind of already did last year with the Giants, had a much better second year than he did first year.
Yeah,
but
he just stays healthy.
Yeah, if he does stay healthy, we can see Andrew Thomas take a big step forward. Robert Hunt from the Miami Dolphins, another guy who's like graded in the 60s over the last couple of years. Good player, playmaker when you get him the ball in space, of course. But Hunt could take that step forward. And then Kevin Dotson with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've talked about the Steelers' offensive line. If Dotson has an opportunity to play, which could be trouble given the guys that they added, but Dotson's one of those guys that kind of graded well as a rookie, was just okay last year. But Dotson's one of those guys, if I'm a different NFL team, given what the Steelers have invested, I might call. I would call about a Kevin Dotson because he might not have a path to the field with some of the guards and centers that they brought in free agency. So I just wanted to highlight some of those year three offensive linemen. Lucas Niang with the Kansas City Chiefs as well, because they're just primed. This is the time when those guys could take a step forward.
If Lucas Niang takes a step forward, that offensive line is silly.
That's what they need in Kansas City, right? They need.
Imagine if he became like a Pro Bowl right tackle.
They're so good.
Yeah,
that offensive line.
That offensive line would be ridiculous and cheap if he became a Pro Bowl caliber right tackle.
They need to continue to have more cheap with Tooney and Orlando Brown having all the money. I saw Austin. By the way, since you left, Austin left.
I know.
Since you went on your trip, Austin left us.
It's sad.
They were calling out a tweet that some Chiefs fan had that said, "Little known fact: Orlando Brown was as good as Trent Williams last year." I don't know what the metric was, but then
starts
probably maybe sacks or something like that. For the millionth time, do not judge offensive linemen by sacks allowed. Doesn't matter what our social media account tweets out there and all these fun stats. Well, this guy's never allowed a sack. That is the worst way of judging a pass protector, using a sack total.
I mean, maybe not the worst way.
It's not the worst. Of course, there are worse ways. I mean, if you were looking at like yards per route run or something, maybe that'd be worse. But sacks is like number 97 on the list.
Andrew Thomas right up there in the yards per route run metric.
That's right, Andrew Thomas. Touchdowns per target.
Yeah.
Andrew Thomas, really high, better than Kenny Golladay.
Definitely.
Who's going to drop off?
Hang on, one more.
You have a leap?
Yeah, Eric Stokes.
Ooh, I like it.
Didn't love Eric Stokes coming out, but Eric Stokes was really quite good last year, and good in the kind of way that, corner, there's almost two elements to it, right? It's like, how good are you generally at sticking to the guy in coverage, and then what happens at the catch point once the ball arrives. Eric Stokes was really good at the first part, not great at the second part, but that's the part I think that tends to the first part is more important to me. Like, if you can demonstrate the ability to consistently be in good coverage and track a receiver and not give up separation and just generally be around when the ball arrives, good things will happen. Because the second part, I think, is easier to, just catch the good end of variance. Like, at some point, the ball location will be a little bit more in your favor and you'll work out better. But I also think, like, if you're in phase all the time, it's easier to coach up the idea of, hey, maybe give an eye, maybe get your head around, throw a hand up,
But there's also variance involved in that, too. That was the Marlon Humphrey
Sure.
coming out. A lot of Bama cornerbacks played the ball differently than out of other schools. Marlon Humphrey was always in sticky coverage. So that is a skill. And then the results are often based off the quarterback, whether or not you got your head around, did you get your arm, did you play through the hands?
That's what I'm saying.
But sticky coverage is a skill set.
But I also think it's easier to kind of the other thing is a skill set as well. Like Trayvon Diggs, ball skills is a skill set as well. But I think it's easier to say to a guy like Marlon Humphrey or Eric Stokes, who's consistently in sticky coverage and in phase, I think it's easier to give him a couple of tips to make him play the ball a little bit better when it arrives than it is to take a guy like Trayvon Diggs, who's got great ball skills, but is consistently getting wrecked in coverage, and say, hey, how about, you don't give up these giant double moves and 12 yards of separation every now and again. Like, I don't think you can do that well. So for a guy like Eric, for cornerbacks generally, I'm all about finding guys that are consistently in really good coverage and then projecting some kind of development from them in terms of how things happen and when the ball arrives. Eric Stokes was always in sticky coverage. That guy did not give up separation almost at all. And a lot of that showed up in terms of the overall coverage numbers. Like, he allowed 51% of passes thrown his way to be caught. That's a pretty low number. Didn't give up a ton of yardage when they arrived. Now, got beaten for some big plays, but that guy, I think, like, he could have an A.J. Terrell kind of second season where we start looking at him and saying, this is an all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber player.
First off, just missed. He's a model guy, Stokes.
Just missed the model?
79.8 percentile. So, I mean, it's like a rounding error from 80th percentile.
That's your cutoff?
Well, when I tested it, it's not my cutoff. There is no cutoff. But when I tested the model, I said, what if I only draft 80th percentile or better?
Okay.
Just to test it. So he just misses it. But I mean, as you know, that can go either way. Now Terrell,
it's an art, not a science.
Right.
You got to fudge these things a little.
Terrell's 85th percentile, which maybe I could have predicted actually. So in hindsight, that year, I would not have drafted the model would not have drafted Jeffrey Okudah or C.J. Henderson ahead of A.J. Terrell.
Good.
A.J. Terrell would have been the best.
And A.J. Terrell, by the way, is a great example of what we just talked about, right? You look at A.J. Terrell playing Jamar Chase when they played LSU. Now, look, he got beaten at the catch point a lot, but he was there all the time, right? Every single play, pretty much, I think every single target. He was at least contesting it. He was there in sticky coverage against Jamar Chase every single play. Now, look, Chase beat him for... Now, you contrast that with Trayvon Diggs when he played Jamar Chase. Not true. Trayvon Diggs was not at the catch point multiple times against Jamar Chase. So I think that's a reasonable little, in a nutshell, the difference between players like that, right? You're talking players that are in consistently sticky coverage, and sometimes they don't make the play because you're going up against elite wide receivers, versus guys that are not in sticky coverage all the time and also don't make the play.
Going back to Stokes again, though, the Packers have Eric Stokes, so you just, talking him up. They have Jair Alexander, and they have Rasul Douglas, who's coming off a career year, playing on the outside, making plays on the ball. I believe early OTA reports, for whatever they're worth, have Rasul Douglas playing in the slot.
Okay.
What are the Packers going to do defensively? I mean, it's a nice problem to have, but they have three. I mean, they have one star corner in Jair Alexander, a potential star that you just mentioned in Eric Stokes, last year's first rounder, and then Rasul Douglas, who had that great season last year. Comes back to, is this really going to be the best supporting cast, best defense that the Packers have had since the Super Bowl team back in 2010?
Yeah, I mean, it could easily be the best defense Aaron Rodgers ever played with. The problem is he's throwing to nobody.
Perfect. This is the choice
Yeah.
they were forced into. Let's be good everywhere else.
Did you watch the golf? The Rodgers Brady, the match?
No, I haven't watched any of the
2.0,
matches.
3.0, whatever they're at.
No, haven't been interested in those.
They're quite funny, largely because they're all mic'd up at all times,
Yeah,
right?
they're all
and they're
like-
talking to the commentary team, which includes Chuck, Charles Barkley.
yeah.
So that on its own is worth watching it for. And there was at one point where Rodgers and Brady, so we're getting late in the thing, there's a hole or two to go, and it's tight. And there's a lot of trash talking happens, right? And I think Rodgers was talking to Brady, and he was like, you don't even need to say anything with Josh Allen. Like, he's been in his own head all day. We're fine there. It's like, Mahomes is the guy. We've got to knock off his game here. I just thought that was pretty funny. They're literally strategizing how to trash talk. Get in the young guys' heads.
I saw Brady tweet something out about Allen or something, like how he's never beaten him. Or
Yeah, there was a lot of trash talk in the lead up to it. But even like during the round, they were getting it.
I mean, with Mahomes,
But anyway,
just
the
bring up
reason
the second half of the AFC Championship.
The reason I brought that up is because Rodgers was the guy with the clutch putt to win the game.
Who did?
Rodgers.
Rodgers had the clutch putt?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Sunk the young guns.
More clutch than you thought. What about some drops?
Dallas Cowboys.
Oh.
Yeah. So everybody, this offseason, an arms race in the NFL. A ton of teams are just dumping resources into trying to dominate next year. And I don't know that it seems like a strange season where it's either contenders or bad teams and nothing in the middle. Like, we've lost the middle class of the NFL, and we've got a ton of really good teams and then a bunch of bad teams that have nothing left. The Dallas Cowboys spent the offseason essentially trying to tread water and just not get worse. And, okay, that's fine. Sometimes you got to do that. But even if they achieved that, and this is as good a team as last year's team, everybody else got better. Everybody else in your category of potential contenders improved. So you lost ground. Therefore, drop.
The optimism show, we put everybody in the Super Bowl, including the Cowboys.
Okay.
Trevor and I. Super Bowl bound, they were. But when we were discussing the Cowboys from an optimistic standpoint, where it's like, well, yeah, they're replacing some pretty key starters here. And you've got the ascending Philadelphia Eagles. Are we going to overrate what the Eagles did on draft night? And are we going to go into the year thinking maybe the Eagles are the team to beat in the NFC East? We'll see. We still have our prediction show back in August or whenever we do it. But it is tough to get excited about what the Cowboys did this offseason compared to other teams, because there's definitely more losses than additions.
And I would put in the same category the Tennessee Titans. So I'm on the road, right, in the E-type. Not an awful lot of cell phone reception or internet in a lot of these places in the middle of the country.
Did you like being off the grid for a while?
Well, because I wasn't really off the grid, because I was tweeting updates and posting updates about this thing to try and generate more money and that kind of stuff. The problem is you're sort of semi off the grid, right? Because sometimes you're enforced off the grid, like you're driving through 800 miles of nothing,
yeah,
and there just isn't cell phone reception. But anyway, my point being, every now and again, the social media team would tweet something out from an article that I already written that was on the site, and we're like, hell, here's PFF Sam top 10.
Oh, you did the AFC teams or something?
No, it was top 10 power rankings, right? And by the time you've seen it, you're 3 hours in, and your timeline is just a train wreck of all these people hating your top 10. Whatever power rankings I put out, I think I had the Tennessee Titans number 9.
In the AFC, I think you had them 9th.
Really?
Yeah. Pretty sure. Think about it. The AFC.
I mean, I don't think that was true, but I couldn't swear to it.
Because I'm pretty sure I remember the tweet. I mean, think about it. Who are you going to put?
I mean, look.
You had all the AFC West teams.
It's entirely possible.
You had
anyway.
3 AFC West teams. You had, the Bills, the Ravens, the Bengals, probably the Colts or something.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. I just
You had the Titans 9th in the AFC.
is that
The
true?
number 1 seed from last year.
All right, fair enough. Anyway, my point being, there was a ton of people who were whinging about that, obviously. But the Tennessee Titans were the number 1 seed last year, and they might not make. I don't think they'll make the playoffs this year because the field just got incredibly hard.
I hear you. Don't forget about the next Mike Tomlin, Mike Vrabel.
The next Mike Tomlin.
Vrabel will continue to get the Titans playing well. He's going to be the difference maker there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true. I just
That's
think,
what's going to make it tricky.
And again, I'm not sure they got a ton worse. It's just that while you were treading water and swapping A.J. Brown for Robert Woods and Traylon Burks, everybody else was like, oh, let's just get Devontae Adams, right? Like that was what the rest of the AFC was doing. Or let's just sign Von Miller. Like everybody else was doing that, and you were just juggling pieces and hoping you ended up as a net even.
I mean, the other part of – so you've got the Cowboys dropping off and then the Titans. I mean, the Titans thing, too, is they also had a point differential of just 65 points. That was worse than the Colts, who finished second in the division. Certainly worse than the Bengals, who obviously went to the Super Bowl. Way worse than, say, the Patriots, who only ended up 10-7. Patriots had a weird year where they crushed some bad teams, but they also just, they were 10-7. They didn't have the most dominant record. The Titans finished 12-5. On one hand, they had this really small point differential for a number 1 seed. On the other hand, they had all these injuries and all this turnover, and they just found a way. And they beat some really good teams, right? They went through that stretch where they were beating the Rams and the Bills and all these good, and the Chiefs and everything. But I would probably agree with you that the Titans will not be the number 1 seed. I'm going to go out on a limb. Titans won't be the number 1 seed this year.
Will they be the number 9 seed in the AFC?
They'll be between 1 and 9.
Well, between 1 and 9.
Because they still get to play the AFC South.
Well, yeah, that's true. If you assume they're not winning the division, which is kind of necessary for them.
You're going to assume that?
Well, I'm just saying, if you're going to assume, if they're going to have them 9, you probably have to assume.
Your power ranking, right? All you're doing is power ranking.
Yeah.
So there's a world where you could say, you know what, I think the Browns are a better team. The Ravens are a better team. Like the Titans could be the 4th best team in the AFC North, but still win the AFC South.
And the West.
In the West.
Could be, so, yeah, that's true.
That's fair. Or the East, too. Like Bills, Patriots, Dolphins.
Yeah. I'm just pulling up the power rankings now. I did have them behind the Colts. So, but
sure.
Yeah, it wouldn't, like, if you have them behind Indianapolis in that division, immediately you're talking about them being 5, 6, 7 in terms of seeding, right? And then if they miss the playoffs entirely, now you're 8, 9. It doesn't take that much, you know?
I get it.
Particularly when you're talking about an AFC West that just went crazy in the offseason. All 4 of those teams are looking to be playoff contenders. An AFC North division that has at least 2, maybe 3 if the Browns have a quarterback, maybe 4 if somehow Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin pull miracles and they can sustain a winning record. Yeah, it wouldn't. I mean, people hate it. I have experienced that from my timeline, but it isn't crazy.
Because we forget the Titans all the time, and now you're trashing them.
Yeah, a little bit.
What about the Arizona Cardinals potentially dropping off? 11-6 last year, obviously make the playoffs. The Niners started out slow last year, but they end up going to the NFC Championship. Of course, the Rams win the Super Bowl, but the Niners started out, 2-4 or whatever it was, and then after week 7, the Niners were just a better team than the Cardinals. The Rams were a better team than the Cardinals. The Seahawks, I don't think, are going to be very good in the NFC West, but you're talking about a pretty tough NFC West. And the Cardinals had one of those off seasons where it's like, DeAndre Hopkins is suspended the first 6 games. Did the Cardinals get that much better? I like some of the stuff that they did. I think they just have some holes defensively, which I thought they did a good job of disguising. I think they did a good job of disguising their holes defensively for the most part last year, and I think that might be tough to do 2 years in a row in Arizona.
Yeah, the problem I have with Arizona is that everything just feels – the way the seasons end makes the entire feeling around the team bad, even if you just looked at things from a high-level picture standpoint, you'd actually think this was like a model of how to build a franchise. So this thing hit rock bottom 2018. They went 3-13. They had a points differential of -200, right? This was a terrible football team. The next year with Cliff Kingsbury comes in. They win 2 more games. They go 5-10-1. They have a points differential of only minus 81. And, it's a step in the right direction. The year after that, 2020, now we're a 500 team. We're 8-8. We have a positive points differential, 43. Kyler Murray's taken that step. They've got DeAndre Hopkins. Everything's looking great. 2021, last year, 11-6. We make the playoffs. Okay, we get whooped once we get there. 83, plus 83 points differential. I think we double almost the points differential from the year before. Like, this is consistently step, all in the right direction. But the last couple of years, it's ended terribly. And they tail off the back end of the season. Things look bad. And, you get whooped in the playoffs. It's like, it almost ends in crisis mode. So, but if you just look at the big picture, we've gone 3 wins, 5 wins, 8 wins, 11 wins. We've gone from minus 200 up to plus 83.
Yeah, overall it's been good.
But because of the feeling around the whole thing, it's like it feels like something that's teetering on the edge of just collapse. And, we're almost waiting for a year where the whole thing unspools and it just goes south, particularly again in this, NFL landscape where there's a bunch of good teams all over the place. I don't quite know what to make about Arizona, whether we should expect like another step forward. Are they going to be a contender for the entire season and, 11 wins turns into like a 13-win franchise and maybe it still ends badly, but this is a dominant football team? Or is it like there's something to this collapse that happens every year and we're kind of just on the brink of this team unraveling entirely and just being bad again?
I could see it going both ways for Arizona, to be honest. I mean, I could see Kyler taking another step forward in year 4 because he's progressively gotten better. The offense has progressively gotten better. But again, it's just these weird second half type of collapses meshed with some injury stuff too, but that's all baked in there. So we'll see. It's June. We have time to change my mind before August, but we'll call a drop off here for the Cardinals.
Okay.
Wrap it up. What else do you have? Anyone else? Players, teams, theories.
Let me think.
What else is going to drop off?
Well, there's always we have to predict a quarterback drop off because that happens every year.
Last year we probably predicted Herbert and we're horribly wrong.
Well, we definitely highlighted the idea that there could be regression for Justin Herbert. There was questions about whether the improvement in his supporting cast and environment would offset the regression, and you would end up kind of with the same kind of Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
Now, as it happened, the regression didn't happen at all, and the environment got better, so you got an even better Justin Herbert. But yeah, that was I
think CJ Beathard's going to drop off because when you click into Premium Stats 2.0
from his league-leading PFF grade,
all part of your PFF Elite package, CJ Beathard's the highest graded quarterback on like 5 dropbacks, whatever it was. Yeah, you get 25% off using the promo code NFL Pod. So go buy one. Use promo code NFL Pod. You get 25% off. Click on passing, and you check out the grades. And when you don't add a filter, I do suggest you add a filter. You have 2 for 2 for 33 yards CJ Beathard, including a big-time throw in there, 95 PFF grade. I'm going to predict he drops off. He's not going to be a 95 graded quarterback next year.
I think that's probably true. You should predict the Tom Brady decline this year. It's finally time.
Definitely. Well, he needs some fodder.
Now that he's retiring, now that this is one last go-round, it's just not now.
We think.
Now it's just not going to happen.
Not confirmed.
Yeah, I've learned my lesson with predicting Tom Brady declines. So it'll be interesting to see if Joe Burrow can maintain that level of play.
I mean, he was the highest graded quarterback last year by 0.1 over Brady when you include the playoffs.
Yeah. Incredible season by Burrow. Again, just like Justin Herbert, kind of took his game to a whole different level, played out of his mind, looked absolutely incredible. Jamar Chase coming in had a big impact on that, an improvement to the team overall. They've done a great job, again, with the Justin Herbert thing, kind of building around him, improving the environment from a team that went to the Super Bowl. But, can Burrow be that guy again, or does he drop off and go back to just being, mortal? Because he was incredible last year. Basically, the point I'm making is that it's very hard to consistently sustain 90-plus PFF grades over a season every year.
Yep.
And even players like Aaron Rodgers don't do that. Back-to-back MVP, Aaron Rodgers had a stretch of seasons in his career where instead of grading in the 90s, he graded in the 80s or even the 70s, and we were like, oh, is Rodgers Is he done? Is this like, have we seen the end of the great Aaron Rodgers? So if Burrow was able to back up, a 90-plus grade with another 90-plus grade, it would be a hell of an achievement.
You heard it here. Sam does not believe in the Bengals, our hometown team, thinks Joe Burrow's trash, and he's going to regress greatly next year.
Oh, Trayvon Diggs. 11 interceptions, not happening this year. We're going to get 6 or 5.
He's going to grade better, though.
And all of a sudden, yeah, probably.
I think Trayvon Diggs, I think he's a good corner.
But all of a sudden,
Trayvon Diggs is going to grade better with half the interceptions at best.
I'm just saying, when a guy goes from 11 interceptions to like 5 and still gives up 1,000 yards, we're going to have a very different conversation.
He's going to give up half the yards and have half the interceptions and have a better grade. That's my Trayvon Diggs prediction.
Yes, I would happily bet money on the idea that we will see his interception total reduced by at least half and his grade will improve. If you could pair those two things and get me like the DraftKings odds on that, I would put money on that.
It's one of those things like when you're grading players at a production level, the value of the interception is strong, but also just difficult to maintain. Like, he made some great plays, not on every interception, but he made some great plays on a bunch of interceptions. On the other hand, it's like, didn't Mike Glennon just throw some up to him and stuff? It's dependent on who, tips and who's throwing it and all that stuff. So that's my Trayvon Diggs prediction.
Yeah, I'm just saying his season, if he has a normal season next year, it is going to be a fascinating conversation regarding Trayvon Diggs, because we had 11 interceptions this year, 9 pass breakups as well. That's a significant number. But gave up over 1,000 yards. That's huge for a corner. Gave up 18.5 yards per catch. Also huge. Gave up 5 touchdowns. Had 11 penalties. These are all very big numbers. So if those things sort of equalize, and the interceptions thing, which we know is a radically volatile number for corners, if that goes to a normal level, and let's say he drops it like Rasul Douglas at 5 picks, and we're talking about a career year.
He had a great year.
Right,
yeah.
Amazing season. So if Diggs goes back to the 5 picks and has a Rasul Douglas, Xavier Howard kind of season in terms of ball production, but still goes up 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns, it is a dramatically different argument to be making. Because now all of a sudden you can't make the argument at all that the turnover, the value of the turnovers offsets all that production, because it doesn't at 5.
Xavier Howard's a good proxy, and we're talking about a guy that, for the most part, though, does turn the ball over, right? He had 7 interceptions back in 2018, 1 in 2019 when he was injured, 2020 had the 10. But last year, Xavier Howard played more snaps, had way more coverage snaps, and his interceptions went from 10 to 5. But nowhere along the way did Xavier Howard give up 1,000 yards in coverage.
No.
600, 700, but he wasn't giving up 1,000 yards in coverage. But he's a baller, playmaker. Let us know. Who do you think is going to drop off? Who's going to take a big step forward? Players. We'll do a breakout players show, too. We did that last year. I think it did pretty well. We'll get into some breakout players at some point. Do you want to hit the mailbag thing on Thursday?
Sure.
All right, cool. All right, so thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thanks to Sam for returning. Didn't know if you were going to or not.
It depended on whether the car would survive.
Yeah, I'm just glad you made it back here to Cincinnati. We appreciate having Sam back. We appreciate everybody that's tuned in, listening or watching. And it's the off season, so we're doing 2 a week, 1 on Monday, 1 on Thursday. So we'll be back here again on Thursday. Shout out, of course, to Cash App, to Underdog Fantasy. Be sure to go take advantage of those great offers. And, of course, NFL Pod over at PFF.com is your promo for 25% off any PFF subscription. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Thursday.